Now to a film that I did actually quite like.
Yeah.
It is Saw X, and it was directed by Kevin Grutert, that's edited the first 5 Saw films, and he also edited this one. He also directed, I think, a couple of the good ones. I think Saw 5 was in there as well. So this guy's got a good history. Tobin Bell is back as John Kramer, and Shawnee Smith is back as Amanda. This is in actual fact more of a sort of Saw 1.5 that slots in nicely between the first and the second iteration. Both films I am very, very fond of. The rough premise of the film is John Kramer is in the last couple of months of his life with it, having terminal cancer, and he is duped into going to Mexico and spending $250,000 on a miracle cure for cancer. Of course, it was a white elephant, and he's been taking advantage of him. And then the plotting returns.
What a ride. This is such a fun movie. I'm not a Saw aficionado. You know, I've seen the first one, of course, a couple times, and I know I've seen a few of the others here and there. I've not seen them all, and I'm not familiar with the John Kramer character, right, throughout the films as they proceed. But this one does such a great job of setting up the conflict, setting up how desperate he is.
Yeah.
He really pulls that off so beautifully. And then the duping, like the scam, that is so topically interesting. I mean, there's so many instances now you see, especially with the internet, elder people getting scammed constantly out of their entire life savings. And this is another clever, like a clever way of sort of motivating that societal problem. And then, boy, they got fucked. Like, there's just one guy you do not want to fuck with, and they fucked with the wrong guy. And so when he comes back, it's such a, I don't know how they keep coming up with these elaborate, beautifully evil, like, I don't know what you would call them. Yeah, they're traps, right? That whole section is really hard to watch. There's a lot of very graphic stuff in there.
On that, Tim, I thought it was back to the original basics of one, the storytelling, where you had somebody that you were in a way sympathetic to.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, you had people that you didn't really mind being tortured because they were despicable people, because the motivations became a little bit convoluted. A guy that was under pressure to pull off a bit of a con on people, and then also whatever it was, like, or police corruption or something. Like, when you get involved in institutional stuff, it's like, well, how complicit can one person be when they've got to feed their family, sort of thing. And it did become a little bit convoluted. But this was, like I said, back to the original basics of the storytelling and the application. The traps were visceral because they weren't these incredibly convoluted, how can we hurt someone in the most elaborate way. It was very much, this is what you have to do. You have 3 minutes, and if you succeed, then you go through. And with that, I wouldn't say it was a criticism, but it was something that made me think about Kramer's methods, that there is 2 people that manage to fulfill the traps and escape. And then Kramer, once they fulfilled their role, he's very sympathetic to them. You've earned your freedom. Get this person to a doctor immediately. And then another bad actor that's injected into the scenario, and he stops that from happening. And Kramer and Amanda, who the lady that won in the first Saw and came back and was a undercover agent kind of thing in the second Saw film, she is very emotionally driven in the film. There was a suggested relationship between her and one of the people that were trapped. There was a young girl that was addicted to pills, and she was like, look, just listen to me and I'll get you out of this, but just shut the fuck up. You're making this harder for yourself. Do you know what I mean? She had a sympathy. She just wanted her to survive the traps. And when the later bad actor came in and stopped that person getting medical attention, and then in actual fact did kill that character, Gabriella, she was the person that greeted him at the hospice, and that was her only role really. But she was complicit, but she was doing it to fund a drug habit. So she was the only one that you could probably have sympathy with. Now, there appeared to be an emotional attachment there with Amanda, and it was emotionally, the film was very emotionally aware. The main antagonist, who was obviously the one that had arranged the conning, they'd made millions upon millions conning people out of the last chance of survival. She was pushing people in the traps as well, going, "You can do it. You've got 3 minutes." Oh, yeah. Let me double back a little bit, sorry, because we got a bit too enthusiastic. They all go for it. There's a hesitation that costs them maybe a minute of the 3 minutes that they have, but they all go for it, and they all just miss out by a little bit. And that made me think, well, there's always going to be a hesitation. Is that time too little? Should it have been 5 minutes? Because you're almost setting them up to fail, when in actual fact, they've all committed to the traps and freeing themselves. So the process has been fulfilled. So I felt a bit like, well, come on. They were seconds away, like 3 minutes. It's not a lot of time to scalp yourself, cut through your skull, and then pick your brain out. That's not enough time to make that decision.
Yeah. Both the first girl with the leg and then the guy with the brain, like, you're right. They both achieve what they're attempting to do. It's just like, she can't get enough fucking like bone marrow into the jar. You know, it's like she's like 2 seconds away. Or the guy, the brain didn't dissolve fast enough, and so he gets fucked. They did it. Like, they did it, bro. Like,
did it.
That's not fair. I don't think
that isn't fair.
He's all about like fairness.
Exactly my thoughts.
Achieve the objective. Like, I have nothing against you. If you achieve the objective, you're welcome to go. And by the way, I've done you a service. You now realize what a fucking shithead you are. Change your ways. But if they've accomplished that task that is supposed to alter them, right? They've done all the things, just waiting for like the fucking jar to fill. It's not fair.
No, it's not fair. And also there was a duplicity of the scale of the traps. There was one where you were getting waterboarded by blood, and it's you and somebody else, and you can decide how lengthy the waterboarding is, and you can flip the switch. And there was another girl that was suspended by her opposing wrist and ankle, and she had to break her ankle and break either a thumb or a wrist to get out of to become unbonded from the trap. And I would say that's an easier thing to do because, one, it's a blunt force impact that, yes, you're going to have to do it more, but it's not fighting against a consistent and prolonged pain. And the waterboarding one is kind of, well, it's uncomfortable, but it's not painful. And also with the girl who she puts a tourniquet on her upper thigh, then with wire, she has to saw through her leg on her thigh, not at the ankle, not at the knee, through the thickest part of her leg, which is horrific enough. But then there's the double whammy of having to put a drip inside the bone marrow to drain it out. And I thought she was just one of the, inverted commas, actors portraying a part. She wasn't the doctor. She wasn't the person that ran the company. And yet she's having to go through all of that. And the time it would take to saw through it, you'd pass out through shock almost immediately. And she's really doing it, and her leg falls off, and then she's giddy, obviously through loss of blood. And then she has to put this fucking syringe into her bone, like into the end of a bone. Like, I just thought there's no balance or perceptive scale of these traps. And some of them, with the time limit, it did feel almost impossible to escape.
The same thing with the brain guy. That is absolutely brutal. Almost more so than any of the others. Assuming he gets out of there, like, he's just fucking taking his brain out and dissolved it in fucking acid. Okay, you lose a leg. That is extremely traumatic. You can get a fucking prosthetic. Your ankle and your wrist are going to heal. This guy's brain is fucking taken out of his head. You're right. There was a disproportionality to like the role that those people played vis-a-vis what they were required to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But But
Yeah.
they were more visceral than some of the silliness, especially in Saw 3D. I think that was maybe Saw 6, maybe Saw 7. I love all the Saw films. I think they're great. I love the way there's an ongoing canon. There's little twists at the end, almost like how at the end of a heist film, it's like, this is what really happens. And with that, when
right.
there's a guy that was actually, when he does, oh, here's the thing, Tim, you know, when Kramer arrives at the retreat and they're giving him a bit of a walk around, and they're in this, it's in like an old warehousey thing that's next to this grandiose old school building, and he's in this surgical facility and he's just traipsing through it with his outside shoes on. I was like,
Yep.
come on, guy, at least get him to like wrap it in plastic. I was like, is that meant to be a clue to, obviously we know what's going to happen in the film, is that meant as a little clue to us? They've forgotten something. Or maybe to him, where he should have thought, why am I walking through a sterilized environment?
Right.
With my shoes on. And there's a guy there he's just come out of it. He has something on his neck because they surgically remove the tumor, and then they have a pharmaceutical and road to recovery there afterwards, right? And he's not present in the traps because he takes them all back to the location, doesn't he? And that's where he's performing the cruelty.
Yeah.
And you're thinking, well, why isn't that guy there? So he turns up with a gun, right? And there's the sort of, do you remember the one with Mark Wahlberg when he's the cop and his son's been kidnapped, and he says, you're in control of the traps, basically, and there's loads of people that he's encountered through corruption in the police force or something. I can't quite remember what it was. And he says, all you have to do is sit here and watch for an hour. And then he ends up going through the traps to try and get to the end to try and find his son. So he's kind of an observer and also accomplice to the people going through the traps. When at the end, after the hour or 2 hours or 8 hours, whatever it is, a safe opens inside the room where he was sat, and his son is in that room with a mask and a big canister of oxygen. So it was true. When the guy with the throat cancer turns up, and he said to him, all you have to do is not touch the gun. And I was like, oh, I get it. You're telling him that's his game. But he's taking an almighty risk, isn't he? Like, there's a bit of happenstance. Like, because even if, it just stands in a different part of the room and the overall machination gets unraveled. But you just accept it. Like, it's Saw, the film has to happen. There was the big reveal at the end. And it's one of the things, I know I've talked about the negatives. This is a fantastic film, thoroughly enjoyable. With Saw, and when you're expecting, with a Saw film, and you're expecting the big reveal at the end, like, you know, as per kind of a heist film, that once you have trotted through the traps, what was the point of the film? If you know what I mean. That was another part of it that it didn't quite nail it for me at the end. It was kind of a little bit clumsy, but everything before, during, and after was just fucking pristine.
It's just such a like taut, sort of like succinct film. I really appreciate that. Like, there's not like a lot of extra shit. Very, very focused. As most of the Saw films I've seen are. I mean, they're very, very well executed in that respect. They're efficient, succinct, easy to understand, but have, you know, this sort of ongoing canon and these sort of like enduring themes. It's a really nice franchise. This is a good entry. Yeah.
And with the characters, they all felt lived in, and they all felt like they had a verisimilitude about them. Like, when they were being tortured, you actually felt it wasn't an avatar being tortured, which is possibly where the IP has fallen down as it's progressed through all the films. I felt pretty quickly and succinctly who each of the characters were, what their motivations were, what were their involvement, and fleshed out, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, totally.
I don't have too much more to say about that, Tim.
No, neither do I. So would you send people to either of these movies?
Well, certainly not It Lives Inside, unless
Yeah.
they were a cinephile and
Yeah.
is an exercise of futility. But yeah, Saw X, great film. It just continues, with obvious exception, this great run of horror films that we've had in the last, I don't know, would you say 3-4 years, something like that?
Yeah. It's been consistently good for a long time, with the
Yeah.
exception of that pile of shit we reviewed earlier. Yeah,
You
I would
keep
do this 100% the same. I would not send someone to It Follows, except for, like you said, someone who's like a cinephile and be interested in seeing poorly executed horror films. Definitely saw X though. Great movie. A
and
lot of
also
fun.
when you sorry, I interrupted you there. When you
No,
compare the two, you have a story that was quite a concept that was quite embellished, right? And they could have made a really good film out of the core principle, but the execution was so poor. With Saw, you have a very straightforward concept, but it was executed perfectly. So it just goes to show you, irrespective of where you start, you can finish in very different positions.
right. Yeah, that sums it up for me.
Okie dokie. Have you been reading or watching anything other than the specified content, Tim? Any
No, I haven't, but
recommendations?
the specified content is takes a lot of energy. Um,
Yeah, if you'd have said, "Oh yeah, I've read 3 other graphic novels," or "I've watched this TV series," I was like, "What the fuck are you doing that with the amount of content?"
no, definitely not.
Do you not understand? Do you not understand?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So yes, you've exposed my ruse quite adroitly. Okay, Tim, do you want to say goodbye to everybody?
Yeah, goodbye everybody. Nice to hear your voice, Matt. We had a good time, and I'm looking forward to next time. So everybody have a good week. We'll see you next week.
Yeah, see you next week from hell. That leaves me, your regular co-host, Matt. Thank you for listening all the way through the episode and indeed to the end. If you made it through this far and you're not a regular listener, it's about that time where we shout Ashburn and Brussels. Thank you very much for listening again, guys. We are the End Pod, and we are on Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts and Spotify and SoundCloud and anywhere that you listen to podcasts. We also have YouTube, which is the End Pod One Shots. We have a Twitter and an Instagram, which is the End_pod. If you're struggling to find this on listening locations, then try searching for Spank Media, the End. And as always, that always leaves me one more thing to say. We have been, and this is the End. Oh God. God, I really
Awesome.
went off on one there.